Have you ever felt that life at times seems overwhelmed with problems? That with every step, new challenges arise, making it difficult to find peace or balance? What if I told you that much of this weight does not come from external circumstances, but from the way we interpret reality? In this video, we will explore how our mind can be both the creator and the dissolver of the problems we face. We will dive into profound teachings ranging from the wisdom of Buddhism and Taoism to meditation and presence practices, showing how we can transform our relationship with life and find a peace that transcends the difficulties of everyday life. If you seek a deeper understanding of what it truly means to dissolve problems and live in harmony with the present, you are in the right place. Get ready for a journey that may change the way you see the world, and more importantly, how you see yourself in it. The way we perceive the world is deeply influenced by our individual interpretations, beliefs, and past experiences. Two individuals may experience the exact same event and still interpret it in completely opposite ways. This is due to the subjective nature of the reality we experience. Imagine an everyday situation, like a party. Two people attend the same event, interact with the same people, hear the same music, and drink the same beverage. After the party, one of them says it was a terrible experience. The music was bad, the drink was poor quality, and the guests were unbearable. The other, however, describes the same party as one of the best experiences they've had in years, full of fun, great music, and amazing people. How can the same event provoke such different reactions? The answer lies in the subjectivity of experience. What is considered pleasant or unpleasant, valuable or insignificant, varies from person to person. Each individual sees the world through unique lenses, shaped by their beliefs, emotional states, and personal contexts. What is gold for one person may be mud for another. This variation shows us that reality itself is not inherently good or bad. We are the ones who assign meaning to it. This idea of subjectivity is not just philosophical, but also practical. Many people have difficulty recognizing that their reality is just one perspective, shaped by their own opinions and emotions. They often confuse their personal interpretations with absolute truths. For example, when someone says, "The party was awful," they may believe they are stating an objective fact, when in reality, they are merely expressing their personal view. The problem arises when we confuse these subjective interpretations with absolute reality. When we believe something is inherently bad or problematic, we begin to suffer not because of the event itself, but because of the way we interpret it. It is important to remember that, just as we cannot hear music without our ears or taste food without our tongue, an event can only be experienced through the filter of the one who perceives it. This perspective also leads us to reflect on the creation of problems. An event, in itself, has no negative or positive quality. It simply is. It is the human mind, with its tendency to analyze, judge, and label, that turns neutral circumstances into sources of suffering or pleasure. The subjectivity of our experiences invites us to look within and realize that often, what we interpret as a problem is actually a reflection of our attitude toward life. When we begin to recognize that the outer world is largely a mirror of our inner world, we take the first step toward transforming our relationship with reality. The problems we face in life are often not intrinsic to reality, but are creations of the mind. This statement, although it may sound simplistic, carries a deep and liberating truth. Suffering rarely comes from the circumstances themselves, but from how we interpret them. This view leads us to a crucial point about the nature of our suffering. It depends on our perception. To understand this, consider a common example, like worrying about money. Suppose two people face the same financial situation. Both have a considerable debt and are temporarily without income. For the first person, this is cause for panic. They feel constant anxiety, lose sleep, and believe their life is falling apart. For the second person, the same situation is seen as a challenge to be overcome. They recognize the difficulties but face the situation calmly, seeking solutions without being consumed by worry. What truly differs here is not the external circumstance, but each individual's internal attitude. Carl Jung, one of the great scholars of the human psyche, said, "What you resist persists." This means that the more we fight against an idea or situation we consider problematic, the more power we give it in our lives. By labeling something as a problem, we create a mental relationship with that situation that makes it bigger than it really is. This doesn't mean that difficulties don't exist, but rather that the way we deal with them determines the extent of our suffering. The human mind has a fascinating and dangerous ability to transform neutral situations into sources of distress. It does this by constantly interpreting, judging, and labeling. This process is largely influenced by our past experiences, beliefs, and emotions. Thus, a small setback can be amplified, turning into a major mental obstacle. For example, imagine someone who fears social rejection. During a party, they notice that someone does not return their greeting. Immediately, their mind starts constructing narratives. Did I do something wrong? Does no one like me here? I'm always rejected. In seconds, their mind has created a storm out of a situation that, in reality, may mean absolutely nothing. The person who didn't respond could have been distracted, or might not even have noticed the gesture. This kind of reaction shows how the mind functions as a problem-manufacturing machine. It is skilled at turning neutral or insignificant circumstances into sources of stress and anxiety. In many cases, we are not dealing with the actual problems, but with the scenarios we create in our own minds. The suffering generated by the mind is deeply tied to the illusion that problems are real, objective, and permanent. However, this idea is a subjective construction. A problem only exists when there is an observer who defines it as such. Without that observer, the problem loses its existence. This view aligns with Buddhist philosophy, which teaches that our problems are rooted in our inability to see reality as it truly is. Buddhism presents the concept of the two truths, the relative truth and the absolute truth. Relative truth is reality as we perceive it, filtered through our senses, beliefs, and judgments. It is the world of labels, where something is good or bad, right or wrong. Absolute truth, on the other hand, is reality as it truly is, pure, neutral, and free from interpretations. When we look at our problems from the perspective of absolute truth, we realize that they have no inherent substance. They are created by our minds, which project meanings and emotions onto external circumstances. This doesn't mean denying the difficulties of life, but recognizing that much of the suffering associated with them comes from our mental resistance to what is happening. Spiritually, this understanding invites us to see our problems in a new light. Resistance to reality, wanting things to be different from what they are, is a constant source of suffering. On the other hand, accepting reality as it is brings us closer to a state of inner peace. In Taoism, this is described through the concept of the Tao, or the Way. The Tao teaches us to flow with life instead of fighting against it. Lao Tzu, the Taoist sage, wrote, "Those who resist the flow of life find difficulty. Those who flow with it find peace." This teaching invites us to let go of the need to control and manipulate reality, allowing things to follow their natural course. When we approach problems from a spiritual perspective, we realize that they are not obstacles to our peace, but invitations for growth. Every difficulty offers a learning opportunity as long as we are willing to look at it without resistance and without labels. What we see as a problem may, in fact, be a call for inner transformation. By recognizing that problems are creations of the mind, we begin to free ourselves from their influence. This doesn't mean ignoring difficulties, but approaching them differently. Instead of reacting automatically, we can observe our reactions and ask ourselves, is this problem really as big as it seems? Am I suffering because of what is happening, or because of the way I interpret what is happening? This practice of self-observation helps us break the cycle of problem creation and cultivate a healthier relationship with life. Ultimately, problems do not disappear, but they lose their power to dominate us. By understanding that they are creations of our mind, we can deal with them with more clarity, acceptance, and above all, serenity. The understanding that problems are creations of the mind is not just a psychological perspective, but also a deeply spiritual one. Various spiritual traditions, such as Buddhism and Taoism, invite us to view life through a broader lens, where suffering is seen as a result of the disconnection between our limited perception and the essential nature of reality. From this perspective, problems do not exist as absolute truths. They are illusions created by the mind that strays from harmony with the flow of existence. In fact, problems can even be solutions. Perhaps something goes wrong so that something worse doesn't happen. In Buddhism, the concept of the two truths helps us understand how our perception shapes our life experience. Relative truth refers to the world as we perceive it, full of labels, judgments, and divisions created by the mind. Absolute truth, on the other hand, is reality as it is, free from these mental constructs. In absolute truth, problems simply do not exist, because they depend on subjective interpretation to gain meaning. For example, Buddhism teaches that everything is empty of intrinsic essence. This doesn't mean things don't exist, but that their existence doesn't have a fixed identity. A problem, then, is not a thing in itself. It only arises when our mind labels it as such. When we transcend this dualistic view, we discover that reality is fluid and dynamic, and our judgments are merely veils that obscure its true nature. Taoism, through the teachings of Lao Tzu, offers a similar view. The Tao, or the Way, is described as the universal force that sustains and guides all things. In the Tao, there are no judgments or divisions. Everything simply is. Lao Tzu wrote, "The Tao is like an empty vessel, yet it is never exhausted. It is the source of all things and beyond all description." When we align with the Tao, we stop fighting against the current of life. The problems, which are mental resistances to the natural flow, lose their meaning. Suffering arises because we insist that things should be different from what they are. This resistance creates a state of disconnection, both from ourselves and from the universe around us. But by flowing with the Tao, we accept reality as it is and find peace even in the most challenging situations. Spiritually, problems can be seen as opportunities for growth and transformation. They show us where we are trapped in limiting mental patterns and invite us to transcend those conditionings. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, we can approach them as teachers that guide us to cultivate acceptance, patience, and wisdom. For example, when we face a difficulty, our initial reaction may be rejection or resistance. We think, "This shouldn't be happening to me." But this resistance only amplifies the suffering. Spiritual practice teaches us to let go of that struggle and to look at problems with curiosity and openness. What do they have to teach us? What within us needs to be transformed so that we can find peace, regardless of the circumstances? This shift in perspective helps us recognize that suffering does not come from the situations themselves, but from our relationship with them. When we accept circumstances as they are, without judgments, we dissolve the power that problems have over us. Instead of fighting what we cannot control, we learn to flow with life, like water that adapts to any form without losing its essence. Another essential spiritual aspect is the perception that we are part of something greater. Both Buddhism and Taoism invite us to transcend the idea of separation and recognize our unity with the whole. When we realize that we are not isolated beings, but expressions of the same universal force, our problems begin to seem small and transient. They cease to be my problems and become simply events in the flow of existence. This spiritual unity also helps us let go of the ego, which is the main creator of problems. The ego wants to control, judge, and impose its will on reality. But when we connect with the divine, we learn to let go of these needs and to trust the flow of life. As Taoism says, he who trusts in the Tao never fears the unknown, for he knows the path always reveals itself. Spiritual practice offers us tools to deal with problems more consciously. Meditation, introspection, and presence practices help us quiet the mind and observe our thoughts and emotions without identifying with them. When the mind becomes still, the problems dissolve, and what remains is the peace of the present moment. This peace does not mean the absence of challenges, but rather the ability to face them without resistance or judgment. It is the serenity of knowing that, behind all difficulties, there is a greater reality, where everything is interconnected and in harmony. When we connect with this reality, we transcend problems and discover a joy that does not depend on external circumstances. When we face problems in our lives, the most common approach is to try to solve them. We are conditioned to see problems as external obstacles that need to be eliminated, as if they were nails to be hammered. However, this approach is not always effective, especially because many problems are created by our mind and do not exist objectively in reality. Solving problems often means trying to rearrange external circumstances so they align with our expectations or desires. However, reality is unpredictable and constantly changing. This means that even if we manage to solve a problem today, tomorrow another may arise in its place, or even the original problem may return in a new form. For this reason, external resolution rarely brings lasting peace. A deeper and more transformative approach is to dissolve problems. Instead of focusing on changing the world around us, we can change the way we relate to problems. This involves a radical acceptance of circumstances and a willingness to let go of control. By dissolving problems, we are not ignoring them, but recognizing that they do not have the intrinsic power to disturb us. That power comes from our interpretation and resistance. The power of acceptance. Accepting the present moment as it is does not mean resignation or passivity. Instead, it is an act of courage and wisdom. When we accept circumstances, we acknowledge that they are already happening and that resisting them only increases our suffering. Acceptance allows us to approach problems with clarity and equanimity, without the intense emotions that often blind us to solutions. For example, imagine someone facing criticism at work. Instead of becoming defensive or resentful, this person can choose to accept the feedback and use it as an opportunity for growth. This acceptance not only dissolves the problem, but also transforms the situation into something constructive. Buddhism teaches that by stopping our resistance to our circumstances, we can experience a sense of freedom. Gil Fronsdal, a Buddhist scholar, described this approach simply: instead of directly solving our personal problems, non-action and meditation can help us move away from our concern with problems. This shift in emphasis can create space for new solutions to arise or for the problem to disappear on its own. The attempt to solve all problems is rooted in our need to control the world around us. We want things to be our way, believing that only then can we be happy. However, life is uncertain, and this need for control creates constant tension and anxiety. Dissolving problems means letting go of this need for control and trusting the natural flow of life. This doesn't mean we should never act to improve our circumstances. Some situations require practical and immediate action, such as resolving a health issue or protecting someone in danger. However, even in these cases, the quality of our actions changes when they come from a state of acceptance and presence, instead of resistance and fear. One of the most powerful ways to dissolve problems is by changing the way we see them. This can be done through reframing, which means looking at a situation from a new perspective. For example, instead of seeing a difficulty as a curse, we can see it as an opportunity for learning and growth. This shift in perspective is deeply connected to spirituality. In Taoism, it is believed that all events have a purpose within the greater flow of the universe. Lao Tzu wrote, "What the wise see as difficulty, they transform into opportunity." When we adopt this view, problems cease to be obstacles and become part of a greater path of personal and spiritual evolution. Meditation is a powerful practice for dissolving problems because it teaches us to observe our thoughts without identifying with them. When we meditate, we realize that many of the problems that torment us are just stories we tell ourselves. Over time, these stories lose their power, and we begin to experience the peace of the present moment. In addition, the practice of presence helps us anchor our attention in the here and now. Often, the problems we perceive are rooted in worries about the past or future. By focusing on the present, we dissolve these worries and realize that, in the current moment, everything is fine. When we change our approach to problems, we discover that inner peace does not depend on external circumstances. This is a deeply spiritual realization. Peace is not something we find outside of us, but something we cultivate within. By dissolving problems instead of compulsively trying to solve them, we connect with a deeper source of tranquility and balance. We would love to hear your reflections. Share in the comments how these ideas resonated with you and whether they helped change the way you look at problems. Your experience may inspire others who are also seeking a lighter and more fulfilling life. If this content brought value to you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos that help transform your perception and cultivate inner peace. And don't forget, life happens in the present moment. Let's live it fully together.